Welcome to Miami-Dade Community College in Focus. I'm Betty Semet, your host. This week we're going to look at the study of and the practice of architecture. And joining me from Miami-Dade Community College are Professor Edward Levinson, Professor of Architecture at our Kendall campus. And next to him is one of our students, Efren Nunez, an architecture student at our Kendall campus. And on the end, Melissa Wong, also an architecture student at the Kendall campus. Thank you for being here. When I think of architecture, Ed, of course there's a standard dictionary definitions, but in talking with you previously, I get the feeling that it's also an emotional feeling kind of definition.
It's a whole thing of creating.
Yes. How would you give us a sense of, because we call the show the depth and meaning of architecture.
To me, buildings are almost like having children. You become so involved with them and in their creation, certainly. And then to watch them rise out of the ground, it's probably one of the most exhilarating feelings, because the creation is in plain words, so much larger than anything else that can be created by man, that it's emotionally rewarding.
Right.
It really is.
Okay, so you, like you say, you start with nothing,
yes,
but maybe an idea or...
Yeah. Sometimes just a flat piece of land, and sometimes the land has to be modified, and then suddenly something just rises out of the land.
Or sometimes, as our students will tell you, your professor gives you an assignment and something has to happen. Ed, what are some of the careers within the field of architecture? Or specialties, maybe that's a better way of putting it?
Well, occasionally, actually a 5-year program, which is a minimum. You can go to college for 4 years and then take a 2-year graduate program. Within the 5 years, you were taught structure, you're taught materials, you're taught all sorts of design. You get into landscaping, you get into interiors. If you want to specialize, certainly within a 2-year master's program, you can go into structures specifically, get more involved in perhaps creating new forms of structure. You can certainly get into historic preservation. Or you can get into city planning, urban development. So there are those particular specialties.
Okay, and at Miami-Dade Community College, would you tell us about the program and specifically some of the areas that we teach?
We have a 2-year program that is transferable to just about any university in the United States. We follow tracks that go to FIU or University of Florida or Florida A&M, but at the moment I've got 3 students at Ohio State. One already has his bachelor's from Ohio State. He's getting his master's at the moment. The other 2 have just started. We have students at Cornell, Arizona, University of Pennsylvania. They transfer absolutely anywhere. The 2 years of credits at Miami-Dade are very readily acceptable, and our Kendall campus has an excellent reputation, so we're really proud of what our students have done, because when they succeed at other universities, in fact, the one at Cornell received an A in her first semester of design. The one at Ohio State came back and told me the same thing. So we're not only doing as well as the other universities, our students actually exceed when we go there.
And it's interesting, they report back to you, so they have, you must make a good connection.
Well, the good ones do, anyway.
That's right.
They're very proud, and I'm even more proud when I hear about their success.
That's neat. We offer an AA degree, as you said. Are there certificate programs or an AS component also?
There's like a 1-year program that's fairly new in CAD, computer-aided drafting and design. We have 2-year programs where people can become what the word is strange, drafters, but people who work assisting architects in offices, and they can get an associate in science in architecture. We have building construction within our department. We have landscape architecture, which is basically the same program as architecture, but they then go on to major in landscaping when they leave us.
Okay, so there are many different avenues.
We also have the history of architecture, which we really would like other students to be taking, because we feel that particularly with not all that much happening in the humanities, and that's not necessarily any architecture being taught at all in the humanities, that very often people graduate from college knowing nothing about architecture, and so we really recommend one of or both of our history courses.
Okay, so we have to try and get that into the general curriculum more.
We really are trying, yes.
Okay, well, let me talk to our 2 students a moment. Efren and Melissa, I'd like to start with just asking you a little bit about yourselves, where you grew up, where you went to school, why you chose to come to Miami-Dade, and perhaps any future plans that you have. Which one of you'd like to?
Well, I guess I'll go first. I grew up in Homestead. Just all my life I've been living there. I went to the magnet program since like 3rd grade, which like opened the doors into the visual arts. That's where I learned how to draw and sketch, and graduated from Design Architecture Senior High School for Architecture. And from there I decided to go to Miami-Dade. I felt I wasn't really ready to leave home. And this is where I am now. Just waiting to finish a couple more semesters in.
Well, it sounds like you sort of were heading toward architecture or something related your whole life. Is that correct, or?
Actually, it's funny because since I was small, I remember like maybe there's something to do with it, but I always liked playing with like Legos and blocks and like building little houses and streets. And even when I was small, I would play like in the sand. My dad would bring me sand buckets and make little sand castles. And I guess it was just like meant to be. And
I have to digress a minute and ask Ed, or both of you, in your experiences with other students, is there often a pattern where people have been interested or showed an interest in architecture when they were younger? Have you?
It's maybe 50-50. Certainly when you hear something like that, you know that's it.
But it's not necessarily the case.
Not necessarily. Sometimes people decide while they're already at Miami-Dade taking other courses. Somebody will come out of business or engineering, and they'll suddenly say, you know, this wasn't for me. I've always thought about architecture. I've never done anything.
Right.
So we really like to encourage both students, certainly.
Okay. Okay. How about you, Melissa? How did you get involved?
Well, certainly not growing up in it. I actually was very uneducated about architecture, anything like that. I actually was majoring, like he said, like students do come out of business or something. I was going to physical therapy. But in the meanwhile, I got to know people that are already in courses of architecture, and they would tell me and what architecture is about, and just by the design, like concepts, like the professor would give them like a task to do, and just hearing them what they wanted to do, I felt that maybe I should go into that. It sounded more interesting, something I would like to do for a lifetime, certainly not every semester picking out a new degree or a new major. So that's how I got into that.
Oh, good. And it appears to be right for you.
Yeah, so far.
Great. And am I correct in that you're a first-year student?
Yes, I'm in actually my first semester in design. It's been just more a concept kind of class where we start out with simple tasks such as like he will assign us either a word or an architect to define and find out what it means and do an abstract model, illustration board, or even a paper about it.
Okay, well, you led us into something I wanted to talk about. I wanted to ask about some of the things that you do in the classes. And I think you brought, maybe Efren can help us if you could.
Sure.
Efren could hold your board there. Now this is a project from your first semester.
Well, okay. I'm still in my first semester. This was our first assignment. I was assigned to Daniel Libiskin, and
who is
an architect from Germany. He did the Museum of Berlin. He's done Nussbaum Museum. He's done Garden of Love and Fire. He's done several other things. He's very famous for his emotions. He takes the structures. He sees what it's supposed to be. For example, the Jewish Museum in Berlin. It was like a memorial. It's actually right now that building has no art, no nothing. The museum itself is an art piece where you can go and look at it. And this is where my project's from. If you see his museum, you go through it and you feel the emotions that the Jews were put during the Holocaust. So I took this board and used it in my design by using some of the exact designs he did on his museum, which you can see in this, which is in the front of his building. And I took the eye because to actually feel the building, you have to see it and go through it. And this is my eye. And I took images that you would feel out of that building and put it into the eye to make up the eye.
And, well, Ed, tell us, I have two questions going to mind, but let me ask you, would you give us an evaluation of what Melissa did? Or
First of all, let me say, in sort of answering the question you asked before, Daniel Libeskind was a concert pianist in Israel after having been born in Poland and is now practicing architecture in Germany.
He is.
So later in life, he's become an extraordinary architect, and a recent issue of the magazine Architecture featured almost entirely, his work. And
I heard a special on PBS radio on him, yes.
Well, Melissa really went further than most students. She really got into the spirit of what Libeskind was trying and has expressed in his buildings. And actually, without ever having seen his buildings, but from readings and writings about Libeskind and by Libeskind. And the whole project is really, it's tortured. And she's even used materials with very rough texture and deep, dark colors. And with the individual pictures in the collage, and even taking a strand of hair from a photograph that she has enlarged from computer images. She's done such meticulous, detailed work that, frankly, as a teacher, that's a creation that rewards me. You know, we're not paid as well as we should be, but when students produce things like that, it honestly does make things worthwhile, because you can see that when a mind gets that perceptive, that's the kind of mind we want in our field.
Yes, and I don't know how much of it will show on the TV, but sitting with it, you know, you're right, you do get a lot of emotion, and the colors, everything.
It's amazing, because the German government has decided to open the museum, as Melissa was saying, for at least a year with no exhibits, letting the building itself be the exhibit, because there is so much of that spirit inside.
That's the ultimate to an architect,
right? It really is, yes.
Right. Okay, well, thank you so much. And this is you're just starting, so
yes.
She did this actually the first week of the semester.
That is great. Well, let's put that aside, because we're going to look at some of Efren's work. Now, Efren, you're a second-year student.
Correct.
Okay, and Professor Levinson, you can help us out. I believe you gave the students a project. Would you?
It's a very real project. This is part of our Kendall campus. This is what we call the 4000 building. And there is an existing walkway, and we have other buildings here. And actually, the architects left us with a little bit of grass in the area. And the really sad thing is that they have to cut the grass, and the doors are not soundproof, so it's very difficult to teach. So I sort of got an idea that perhaps we should get rid of the grass, do other planting and bring back some nature, but turn it into a place where students can actually hang out in the midst of campus, make a hard surface, but give them some shade. And in the process, we designed a coffee kiosk. Someplace where there could be coffee machines, and they might even sell a slice of pizza, and students walking past this, sort of impulse buying, would smell the coffee, look at the pizza, buy something, go on to class, but also have a hanging out place. And maybe when they weren't selling coffee, we could even have a class outside, which we really like to do. And in Florida, you need a little shade. So the students start with the kiosk concept itself, and then do things with the ground and really try to get a little color, a little bit of movement, a little kinetic energy, which is not really that existent. Everything on campus is at 90 degrees to everything else, and we so try, at least in design class, to get things that are a little different, a little unusual, a little eye-catching, and stimulating at the same time.
Okay, so set this up for us. The assignment you gave the students was to design something for this area?
First a kiosk, keeping in mind that they were going to redo the entire plaza. Okay. And Efren did quite a few unusual things. This was actually done in second semester.
Okay, now Efren, before we go into design, what did you think when you got this assignment?
Well, at first, I just started to draw. Like, I drew some sketches, and there was I picked up a shell from the beach. I think it was a horseshoe crab, those like primitive shells. which reflects the humpback shape on the canopy on top. And then I just started playing around with it, and then I figured, just like Levinson said, that everything in school was like 90 degrees to each other, and I figured I saw the school like in this like three-dimensional matrix. So I figured that along the main axis of where the main pedestrians walk along, that this would be the ideal place to place the plaza where it's at. And bringing up that grid, which becomes a three-dimensional matrix, including the building and the surrounding buildings, I figured that by twisting the canopy at a different degree, which would bring out the whole plaza by itself. That's why there's the existing grid on the bottom, but then you have those wide like strips on the side which like throw the grid off completely, which would be that three-dimensional grid. And then you have the existing canopies in the center completely at different degrees from the building and everything around it.
And this is the current building?
This is the current building, and that's the current canopy, which I thought that they were just quite as tall as the buildings in the whole campus, so I decided to add a different type of canopy on top of the existing canopy, which is right here, just to complement to bring the whole thing as one.
And is this a walkway, or what is this area?
This is a walkway which connects
existing.
you. That's the existing, and I
Okay, so
decided
you tried to soften it and change the...
Yeah, just to unite the whole thing.
Okay.
Might want to mention
What
this
else
addition,
what other factors did you consider in designing this? Lighting, I would imagine, would be...
Lighting. Actually, the main thing was pedestrian flow, like which are the main axes in this whole complex of buildings, which would be the ones you see along this side, this right here, where the main flow of people are going to the building. So I figured that since this was the space between one building and the other existing building, and the auditorium the auditorium is right here, so everybody has to cross through here. And by having a canopy, which you could smell coffee or whatever they might be selling, which would be like bring people to like, congregate in the center of this piazza or plaza that's right there.
And do you have any seating? Did you plan any seating areas, or you don't want them to
Actually,
stay?
the project was to bring in a movable kiosk, like where not to have something to compete with the existing cafeteria. So I guess they would bring like a little cart and would sell stuff there, and then people will go back to class and not create too much of noise for the existing classes right there. And then I added the second kiosk, which is on top on the second floor. Being in this building quite most of the time, I'm just kind of crowded when kids come out and people smoking, and they only have the little center space right there to gather around, and you have to smell their smoke and like bypass everybody. So I decided to bring out a kiosk from the second floor where people could smoke outside, talk, and it relieves the cramp and the congestion within everybody else. So that's why I have that second one right there.
And it has a very inviting feel to it. Like, and I think that was probably what you're saying is one of your objectives, and you kind of want to go there. Aside from smelling the pizza, it looks good and warm.
That's the whole thing. It was my graduate school teacher, Louis Kahn, said that good architecture would evoke its function. And if you can get, he would say, for instance, a library, if it was properly designed, you'd want to take a book off the shelf and immediately sit down and read it. So this evocation of function is what we really strive for.
Yes, I would think that would be very, very important. And I look at this and I wonder if you are a patient person, because the model, the construction, I think after I did the first two little sticks here, I would be going, ah!
Actually, I guess I could be, I think everybody, once they're working on a model like this, you start off cutting perfect and time starts running out and the projects do, and you start rushing, but you try to keep everything as a whole and keep it looking exactly the same. But it takes a lot of, what do you call it, patience to sit there.
Yes, stick-to-itiveness, yes.
And start cutting and gluing and changing things around. You might do one thing and then you go, wait, that doesn't look right there, and then you have to change it again, and it takes a lot of time.
You know, what is also interesting to me is that architecture isn't just the building, and I think you alluded to that, because I'm looking at your landscaping. I mean, in this situation, it's minimal, but you still had to choose what you'd put in and where. And I think this is an interest of Melissa's particularly. And environment, and what are some of the considerations when you're designing something?
It's probably almost everything. You even have to learn a little about politics too, just to be able to get your projects built and know how to run through the system and do everything. Now, architects really can be like Renaissance people. You've got to know everything. As I said before, interiors, landscaping, city planning. People think you need to be good at math, and the very sad thing is, and sometimes people are turned off from the profession because they'll say, well, I'm not really that good at math. You really don't need that much mathematics to get through as a professional. We do hire engineers when we need consultation with structural things. You just have to get through the math in college, and then you're home free, actually. But there's so many environmental conditions that really have to be understood. Just the idea that when people are cutting grass, and the architects did not consider the fact that that sound would totally drown out people trying to teach. Actually, an element of common sense. I try to teach the students to learn from the mistakes of other architects and never repeat them. And we have a lot of object lessons, unfortunately, on our campus.
Right.
Including the lack of color and the rigidness of everything.
Okay. Efren, what are some of the other courses that you've taken, or other courses and or projects you may have worked on?
Currently in Design 4, which is the last design for the 2-year program. We're currently doing a newsstand, which involves further development of the project, looking at the streets, the way traffic flows, sewer, lighting, bus routes, in order to accommodate the newsstand itself, and working with the concepts and design that are already existing in the city itself, whether you want to complement the city or like be completely different. But that's currently what I'm taking right now, Design 4, and a couple classes that I still have left.
Do you both, I know you've had more classes than Melissa, but I want to ask both of you, in your classes, do you tend to work alone or in groups or in pairs? How does that work out?
We usually work alone, but we feed off of each other. We actually, our peers consult us as we consult them, saying, oh, that looks good, well, maybe why don't you try this? And as for the professor also looking and said, well, this doesn't work, or why don't you try this, maybe something looks better here, or, and you have a variety of stuff that you wouldn't see yourself, and by seeing that through other people's eyes, you tend to build on that and even create something even totally different than what you had before.
Oh, that's great. So you are, there is a collaborative aspect.
Oh, yeah.
Great. What else do I want to ask you? There's so many things. Well, okay. We started out talking about the emotional or the imaginative parts of architecture. What about the pragmatic and practical aspects? I'm thinking one thing, technology. I would imagine technology is very important. Could you elaborate on that and any other of the maybe practical aspects that you stress?
Computers, particularly. Our college is really quite advanced with computers. There's a large number of them, both the IBM type PCs and Macintosh certainly. We work with tutorials in our computers. The students do their drafting and designing through computers as they progress through their semesters. So that's a major aid.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Frank Gehry's Bilbao Guggenheim, for instance, could not have been built without the aid of computers. Gehry himself talks about this a lot. You just can't draw some things that are so sculpturally done without a computer.
We're showing something on the screen, and could you tell us what that is? I think you brought a drawing.
Efren has some elevations.
Yeah, that's elevations for?
Of this kiosk, of the original kiosk.
Okay. All right. What else? So you don't use the old, any drafting?
No, we do.
Do you?
Yeah, you really have to know how to draft by hand in order to tell the computer what to do.
Okay.
There's a lot of nuances and just a lot of technical knowledge, and then you apply everything that you've learned to the computer.
Okay, what are the career opportunities in architecture, say, in Florida and nationally? Are there jobs?
Florida, which is always growing, the more a community grows, the more it needs anything, schools, hospitals, police stations, fire stations, homes, apartments. So Florida is an area that's always ripe for more architects without question. But our students travel all over the United States, not only to school, but often leave Florida and settle in other places. One student went to work for Edward D. Stone Jr. in Fort Lauderdale, a landscape firm, and wound up running their office in North Carolina, and ultimately bought out the office himself. So we have one success story in that particular field.
We are showing the phone numbers that people can call for information. The architecture program is part of the design technology program at the college, and we offer architecture at several of our campuses. So we do encourage people to call, and I know, Ed, you've been teaching at the college for 31 years and have done so many innovative things with your students, and we only have another minute or so, so I want to ask you, anything you'd like to add about the program? Or
We've always been enthusiastic about our program at our Kendall campus because our students have done so well when they've left us. We always feel so very confident. There was a time, and it may still be continuing, when our students going off to the University of Miami, which has a wonderful relationship with us, they take our students very freely, even without an AA, just completing 2 years of the right courses. Our students would be graduating on the basis of every other year, first in their class at U of M. So as a local success story, that's something to talk about, but their success throughout the United States, spreading our reputation, is quite personally encouraging.
Well, great. I thank you both for joining us, and for Ed. I look forward to seeing your works around town and around the campus. Thank you again, and good luck to all of you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.